Hello and welcome to Stocks Down Under. My name is Stuart Roberts and I'm one of the co-founders of our company. And joining me from Perth today on Tuesday, the 7th of February 2023 is Mr. Brett Hazelden, who's the CEO of OD6 Metals, ASX OD6. Brett, good afternoon.
Oh, thanks for having me, Stuart.
Fancy that. You had the ASX code named after the company's name. So easy to remember.
That makes life easy, so you should be able to forget the ticker too easy.
Right. Now, some background for those folks who don't know the resources very well. OD6 is the sixth company spun out by your, I'll call it Source Group, if I could put it like that. Talk to me about the origins of OD6, and then we'll talk about the main projects you were going after.
Yeah, so there was three smart geos that were effectively looking at it. They had a think tank, and they thought, right, how are we going to find a whole heap of good projects going forward within West Australia? And they thought, right, let's go mine the Department of Mines database that's been collecting all this data from various explorers over the last sort of dozen or 10, 20, 30 years. So they've been mining that database and going back over old ground and old results. And then they're coming up with obviously things that are probably of interest now that probably weren't of interest 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So effectively they've come across one for diamonds, one for iron ore, one for gold, one for rare earths, and we were obviously number 6, and then OD6 was the one that then got spun out. So the first one really listed out of that whole process. And,
and OD stands for?
ODET Geoscience. So ODET being a white swan, effectively.
All right, now OD6, your thing is rare earths. You've got a couple of rare earths in the southern part of Western Australia. One down near Esperance that's looking particularly interesting at the moment in terms of the drill results that are coming up and an aeromag survey that you've got.
Yep, so two main projects are Grass Patch and Splinter Rock. Splinter Rock is our flagship. Both of them are located just north of Esperance, so about between 50 to 150 k's north of Esperance. They're both the size of the Australian Capital Territory, just to give you the size of the area we're talking about. So massive areas, about 2,500 square kilometres each. There's historic results, there's some historic drilling results before we pegged the tenements, obviously through that think tank process. They identified a few rare earth areas, so total rare earth above 1,000 ppm trio in clay. So from that point of view, we've then gone and obviously pegged those areas.
Good. Anyone who knows anyone in rare earths, when they hear that kind of number on trio, total rare earths oxides, they get excited, right?
That's right, especially from a clay-based point of view. If you're a little bit lower than that, the economics will struggle to stack up. Obviously, if you're a hard rock guy, and I might talk to hard rock versus clay-based in a sec, but if you're hard rock, you want a percentage or 2% to make these things economic. So the benefits of clay is all the hard work's already done by nature. So it's already been crushed, ground to bug dust. And a lot of it's also then enabling it to be able to be leached easily. So we don't have that high capital cost to put in a mill and drill and blast, etc., and all the operating cost that goes with it. So we can effectively free dig it up. And I sort of relate it to hard rock being a bit like refractory gold versus oxide gold. So we'll dig it up, we'll put it into some leach tanks like you do in a normal gold process, and then put some acid with it. So we don't need to crack it, we don't need to roast it, we don't need to put a whole heap of energy into it comparatively.
So I was recently at a resources conference in Perth, and there were a lot of companies working on rare earths. And the big debate in the rare earths community is who's got a true clay-based deposit. Sounds like the definitions of the best kind of clay is still being debated.
Yeah, so I think when they do that, they're referring to ionic clays, and ionic clays have been around in China for a long, long time. So, but that said, ionic clays aren't always ionic clays. So ionic's the easily leachable point part of that ore body that you might get between 20 and 50% recovery. But if you add a little bit more acid on it, and you obviously take the pH down a little bit further, you can actually leach a lot more of the colloidal type material that's not quite sitting on the surface, but a little bit of acid in there leaches it out and gets it going. So I don't think there's any true clay-hosted ionic deposit in Australia that I've seen. Everyone's got a little portion of it, somewhere between 10 and 20%. But the reality is we all need to be putting a bit of acid in there and trying to get the recoveries up. Otherwise, these things just won't be economic.
To that point, have we done any met test work on either of the projects you've got?
So we've got it all in with ANSTO at the moment, so Australian Nuclear Science Technology Organisation. So they've been dealing with sort of go back to Mount Weld and Linus and a whole heap of others for the last 10, 15, 20 years type thing. So they've got the technology. We've been working with them. Those results are due out in March at this stage, March or April. But within the region, there's already been a few other players that we're all working together down there and talking together, trying to figure out the best geology and metallurgy. They've already seen somewhere between 50 and 70% recoveries, and potential to upgrade it as well by just removing all the coarse fraction. So all the rare earths are generally located in the fines fraction, so the sub 45 micron sizes.
Judging by the high grades that you're looking at, and the territory that you're in terms of the amenability to processing of comparable deposits, if that met test work comes back positive, then potentially you won't necessarily hear champagne bottles popping open in your office, but it'll be a reasonably straightforward path to development of maybe the next world range, right?
Well, I hope so. I know nothing's ever straightforward in this world with the ups and downs of GSCs and everything else, but as straightforward as you can. I mean, the key we've already got is the resource size that we're looking at is quite massive in terms of tonnes. So he's not talking 1 million tonnes or 2 million, he's talking hundreds of millions, if not more. So there's, from the AEM survey, so the aerial electromagnetic survey that we've done, we've identified over 250 square kilometres of clay basins.
That's a lot of strike.
Yeah, and we've already done the width of them, so we've drilled across those widths. So now we know it's between 1 to 5 kilometres wide, but from what we've seen, it's potentially 10 to 25 kilometres in length, and we've got 4 of those. So, and then they're 20 metres in thickness. So you can quickly times out 20 metres by a couple of kilometres by a couple of kilometres, and you get a few hundreds of millions of tonnes. So, but the key for us now is looking at the geometallurgy relationship. So we want obviously the highest grade, more grade wins in terms of revenue. But if you can't get it out, then obviously you're not going to make as much revenue. So for us, it's now finding the highest grade location with the best metallurgy, and then obviously looking at other things like environmental approvals and heritage, and making sure that we pick the best zones for that initial payback period when you're actually building something and want to get rid of the banks.
And you're only 50 kilometres, you say, from Esperance. So it's fair to say that the infrastructure is not an issue you have.
Yeah, so grass patch is 50 kilometres. The Splinter Rock's about 150 kilometres, but it's all sealed roads virtually all the way out to Splinter Rock, which is the flagship. So we might have to put in 10 or 20 k's worth of sealed roads just to finalise it. But there's already a port down there. It's one of the deepest ocean ports in the Southern Hemisphere, being the Esperance port. There's already iron ore, wheat, barley, a whole heap of other different commodities going out as well. So,
and judging by the decline in iron ore shipments, there's going to be plenty of capacity for other stuff like what you've got.
Well, you think about it, by the time you get a product out for us, we're only talking sea container sizes going out each day. So
yeah, fair enough.
We're going on those sea container ships, and it's still cheap enough to send it to Perth if you really wanted to, but logically you'll try and get it out of Esperance. I mean, the other benefits of Esperance as well is there's a whole heap of wind down there. You've got Twiggy looking at putting a big hydrogen facility down there, all based off wind generation and solar generation. So from our point of view, there's that potential there to put in wind turbines, put in solar, hook it up with some either battery power, hydrogen power, and suddenly you're a green supplier of rare earths into the markets. And all the Europeans are going down the road at the moment trying to legislate that's what it needs to come from to go into these wind turbines and electric cars and everything else.
If you've been hiding under a rock for the last 10 years, let me tell you about the, well, no, I'm talking to our audience here, not you, Brett, you know this well. The Chinese dominance of rare earths has started to cause problems geopolitically. We're talking in excess of 90% of the world's productive capacity for producing rare earths. And both upstream and downstream comes from China. You're part of the pushback from the rest of the world to get as much production capacity outside of China. How do you expect to benefit from a public policy perspective from that?
Look, the governments, both from Europeans, Americans, Australian, you go into Japan and South Korea and all those places, they're actively encouraging and financing a lot of these new critical minerals, be that the rare earths or copper, lead, zinc, not lead, zinc, but obviously all the lithiums and everything else. So they're looking for those battery components or the components that then make use of the batteries really, really efficient. So we're seeing the Critical Minerals Office at the moment. They've got a grant out there for $50 million. That's going to be split up between a whole heap of people. Federal government's recently put in $1 billion into Iluka to build a refinery in Eneabba in Western Australia.
Hence you talk about shipping containers out of Esperance potentially to go up to Eneabba.
Yeah, or just put it on a truck up to Eneabba if you wanted to. Or We might downstream process a part of it ourselves, and the next logical step as it goes to the US or UK or into Japan to create the metals and the magnets that then go into the cars.
Right. Now, Arafura Resources is getting ready to get their blockbuster up and running. So it's not just Weld Range anymore in our part of the world. How do you benefit from the growing knowledge base for rare earths in Australia?
Look, I think you've got obviously Gina Reinhart that's putting some money into Arafura, and then you've also got Andrew Forrest that's put some money into Hastings as well.
Right.
You've got Luca that's probably the next cab off the rank that the federal government's put some money in. So the knowledge within the sector and from investors is now growing, and if those big billionaires are looking and putting some money in that way, then there's got to be a reason behind it, I'd say.
All right, so it's fair to say you're desperately seeking a meeting with Gina to tell her about your project, right?
Oh, we want to get the share price up a little bit first, so at least be $300 or $400 million, and then she can come and take a little small stake in us.
A very astute investor, our Gina. Brett, it's a very exciting project, and well done on bringing it this far, particularly those grades. Your colleagues must have been astounded when they did the rework and saw what was potential.
Yeah, look, the initial bits, everyone thought, okay, there's potentially something there, but as we drilled it out and as we got closer and closer spacing, just to have those grades come out across kilometres and kilometres of intersection just says there's something massive out there. Metallurgy proves up shortly, then yeah, as you say, the champagne corks will be popping and we'll be having a good time.
All right. Thanks for talking to Stocks Down Under.
Thanks for having us.